Gang, Andrew, as you know, is joining us over the phone, and so I assume that there are no objections to his participating in the meeting electronically.
No objections.
Okay. May I have the roll call, please?
Trustee Collins.
Present.
Trustee Hyatt.
Here.
Trustee Miller.
Here.
Trustee Pierce.
Here.
Trustee Solomon.
Here.
Trustee Thomas.
Here.
All right. Trustee Collins, would you tell us about the Finance Committee and what we did at the committee?
My pleasure. We discussed essentially two things. One was options for how to cover borrowing that we will need to do, not only for stormwater improvements, but the remainder of the items on our needs list. It was a discussion of whether you pay more to get it paid off sooner or stretch it out, and what to do about unforeseen circumstances. There are always some, including stormwater improvements. I believe that the consensus tended towards the middle path, not paying it off super fast nor super long. We have not locked in, we don't take votes in finance, but there was a staff reaching out to the board for some consensus on that, and I think the consensus was to be looking at a 20-year term. And so staff will package this for our vote, and it'll be back in the future when it's ready for our decision. We looked at monthly financial reports. Things are largely on target. A couple of things are not. The water fund had a very poor year because it was very wet and you didn't need to water your lawn. It was very cool, so water sales are low, but the fund balance is healthy. The only other fund that has any issues is the E911 fund, because we had to make an unplanned replacement of some of our 911 equipment, and we will be addressing that later tonight through a supplemental appropriation to cover that by a fund transfer. Other than that, the funds are on target and in good shape. That's my report.
Thank you, Bruce. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I so move.
Second?
Would you call the roll, please?
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hyatt.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, we're at that point in time when we have public comment. If somebody wishes to address us on a subject not on the agenda, and so I will invite Joe to take the platform and, for the record, tell us your name and your address, and then tell us what you've come to enlighten us on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Joe Keefe, for the two people in the room who don't know me. I live at 411 Randolph in Glencoe. I'm here for three very brief purposes, Mr. President. First is, I couldn't let three trustees' terms expire without haunting them one more time.
Thank you,
That's
Joe.
number one. Number two, Mr. President, twice in the past 6 months in our neighborhood, we have been confronted with what may be called the zoning issue, may be called the subdivision issue. I am here to request direction from the board in one of several directions. I also would like to introduce Carl Sward. Carl is a neighbor of mine for the past 20 years, maybe a little bit longer, and the subject of my concentration is Carl's property. Although it does relate to other properties, I did appear before the zoning commission in a similar manner about 4 months ago, 5 months ago, with a property on Adams. Both times I was requested to appear before bodies to do this, essentially to assist with the neighborhood in the area. I would point to the map here, Mr. President, that the red dot there is Carl's property. I think it's 365 Jefferson. This is, as many lots in our area, is what would be considered an unusual lot. I would not call it non-conforming, but it is, in square footage, a very large lot. I was told today that the lot is actually 100 feet from east to west, and then I was told 210 feet, but I think, Carl, we said, the plat indicates something like 270 feet, is that right? 210. Oh, it is 210? I might apologize. So 210 by 100, for the combined lot there. You'll see that the division there, the county recognizes the two separate side-by-side compositions there, but it's actually one residential lot. And Carl's house is the red dot there, his garage is just to the north there. I hope to ask in Carl's behalf, but also the neighbor's behalf, to seek subdivision of the lot and what we would call correct subdivision of this lot. It would be not only impractical, but likely not feasible to subdivide the lot along the county line side by side, in that you would have two properties of 50-foot width. You wouldn't be able to, you'd build a 17-foot wide house or less. What we would like to do is split the lot going across rather than up and down there, which would divide the lots into two lots of 10,500 square feet, rather than the current lot, which is 21,000, pardon me, Carl, a little over 21,000 square feet right now. I bring it to the board's attention because the two conditions that apply here, if subdivision isn't permitted, the house that would almost inevitably be built there would be a little over 5,600 square feet. In our neighborhood, you'll see my house is 2 to the north there, and our houses are very small in comparison. Our houses are about 1,000, 1,200 square feet. The two, Mary's house and our house side by side, are about 1,200 square feet. And in the practice of the neighborhood, may I approach up here, Mr. President? I just want to point out some areas. If you could widen just a little bit, I'd like to show just a few things here. There are, could you go update just a little bit so I could show you the house over here? This is a good example of a lot that back in the day was not subdivided, and this house is enormous. It's about 6,000 square feet. And what that does is it stresses the houses next door and around the neighborhood. Houses next to it, then, rather than increase in value, actually the value is either static or is stressed, because you're living next door to an absolute, we've all seen this in the past in various types of configurations. The goal then is to subdivide what we would say is correctly, which is side by side with the houses facing Randolph, although this is a Jefferson address. What we'd like to do is subdivide so the houses are facing Randolph, and then conform the houses more similar to the houses in the neighborhood, 2,800, 3,000 square feet this way. The reason I bring it to the board is that technically we cannot build, Carl could not build in that capacity, because the lots going east to west would be 100 feet deep. Again, they would far exceed the minimum requirement of 10,000 square feet, but going east to west here, it's 50 feet and 50 feet here. Going this way, so that's 100 feet, it's 210 feet this way. We want to subdivide this way. So there's a house here and a house here, and again, conforming to the neighborhood rather than, what we're asking for is two houses that are more conforming to the neighborhood rather than what any developer would do, which is the largest house they could build on a single piece of property. I would note to the board, obviously you would understand that this would increase the value of the individual lots if it is able to be subdivided, but more importantly for the neighborhood, it actually does then preserve more adequately, in my mind, the relative real estate values of the house around it, or the houses surrounding it, like ours, a small house that is not, we don't have the capability to build these massive things. So, thank you. Having said all that, we are either looking for a referral, direction, or permission. We're looking for a referral to the appropriate body to provide the input and discussion and conversation, then perhaps bring back a recommendation to the village board, or we're looking for permission from the village board and you say go ahead and subdivide, or some other configuration along that line. I'd be happy to answer questions if there's any regarding this issue here.
Are there other questions? If there are no other questions, it seems to me that this has a number of combined aspects to it, including the subdivision ordinance, which would normally be the plan commission handling, and to the extent there's questions of turning and where the curb cuts could be and all that, it also tends to sound like a plan commission question as to what the policy is and why the current restrictions are the way they are. And there are also some zoning issues that I could see applying this. So to me, I think the proper thing to do, and I will ask guidance eventually from Phil and Dave on it, I would like to refer it to staff to look at this issue, understand it fully, and to map out and scope out what are the issues and what would be the best approach to take, and for staff then to come back and advise the board on
Thank you,
their
Mr.
thoughts and
President.
questions.
I would offer to you, and the reason why I strongly urge that policy, if not others as well, is we recognize, I certainly recognize the notion that this property would not have the rear yard of that 125 feet as per the zoning regulation. But to emphasize this again, all of the normal setbacks could still apply to the actual construction of new housing in there without threatening any house in any direction, because the lots are still far in excess of the minimum necessary. What I would hope is if we couldn't get relief under subdivision, then I might be able to come back to the village board with perhaps a change in the language of the ordinance itself, indicating if the lots are in excess of the minimum, then there could be some sort of further relief from the necessary rear yard depth, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, then what I will do is I'll refer it to staff and ask Dave to look into it in depth, and when they're ready to report on that, then Dave can get in touch with you so that you know when they're gonna come back and
Perfect.
tell us what they found and where they're going, and we can pursue it from there.
I would just like to compliment the deliberation of the board, and also to note that I didn't make any bad jokes in this entire presentation, which is very great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I realized that it was you here doing it.
You didn't recognize me. Thank you all, and may I say again to the trustees, Bruce, Joel, Andrew, thank you again for your wonderful service. I hope to see you at your final meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for your indulgence. Thanks, everybody. Did I get that joke? Thank you again.
And Andrew, I can only speak from about 6 or 8 years' experience, and I don't either. Okay. Anyone else wish to address the board?
Who could follow that?
I unfortunately have to.
I'll
I
have
think.
to turn it over to poor Phil to try.
I've never told a good or bad joke in my life, so. Just a couple things on the manager's report this evening. First of all, I enjoy this new tradition that we've begun of introducing some of our new employees to the board and to the community in this kind of public way. And I want to take a moment to introduce Alex Urbanchik, who's the village's new water plant superintendent. He's sitting in the back there wearing a very apropos colored shirt. Following what was a pretty extensive regional search, we selected the best candidate for this position from within our ranks, and he started in his new role last month. So Alex, he's here with his wife Joelle, who's sitting in the back there. Dave has stepped up to say a few more words about Alex and formally introduce him.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Tonight it's my pleasure to introduce to you the village's new water plant superintendent, Alex Urbanchik. Alex and his wife, Joelle, has been noted, have joined us this evening. Alex was appointed to the position in January following a regional recruitment process that began with the announced retirement of longtime superintendent Tom Weathers last fall. Alex is a 2005 graduate from Purdue University with a bachelor's in civil engineering. He worked as a project manager and a superintendent for 2 residential development companies before coming to the village in 2011. He has worked in the Public Works Department as a mechanic and for the past 2 years as a water plant operator. Staff believes that Alex has the unique skill set of operational hands-on work experience blended with a confident determination to manage both the routine and complex challenges that come with operating an aging, conventional water treatment plant. He will be a great asset to the department and the village as we look to the future and long-range plans for water production in Glencoe. Alex has assumed his new duties this month and has already been baptized with several water main breaks in the distribution system, as well as frazzle ice plugging our intakes at the lakefront. So with that, I just wanted to take opportunity tonight to introduce you to Alex and allow him an opportunity to say hello to the board.
It's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to meet all of you, and look forward to working with you many years to come. Thank you very much.
I look forward to Alex getting to indoctrinate and teach our new trustees all about the water plant and the great tradition of his predecessor.
I had the good fortune of having lunch with Alex before we offered him the position, and let me just add that this is a guy who I think has all the right things that we're looking for from a employee, and exactly the type of person that I enjoy working with. And so it's going to be a great long tenure between Alex and the village, just as with his predecessors, and I'm very excited that he's been willing to step up for this position. So, and thank his wife for letting him also step up and giving him to us for so many hours of the week. So we appreciate that. Moving along, the next item is apropos, given that we've just introduced our new water plant superintendent, that I'm providing a bit of an update on our water system master plan. We last updated the board back in late 2014 regarding the water system master plan, which is being completed by Strand Associates. Obviously, this is our water plant study as well as the study on the remainder of the water system. We expected that this plan would be complete by the first quarter of 2015, and I'm pleased to say that we are currently finalizing work on that plan, and staff and Strand Associates are planning to present it to the village board next month at the board's meeting on March 19th. This initial presentation will be an overview of the plan, explaining the outcomes, factors, and methodologies for the recommendations that are within it, and will be an opportunity for the village board to provide their initial thoughts and reactions. This is important, what I'm going to say next, because I want to make sure that it's clear to anybody who may be listening. The village board is not being asked to make any decisions on March 19th. We have a long way to go regarding determining the means and methods for moving forward with the plan. And a necessary component to that will be a significant public review process. Along those lines, we're planning to roll out a comprehensive communications plan to ensure our residents are informed of the process and have ample opportunities to provide feedback. So, more to come on March 19th. Dave and our representatives from Strand Associates will be providing that presentation to the board. As I said, this isn't a point at which any decisions are being made, but to provide the board a first look at this finalized plan, which has been in the making for many, many months. So it's exciting from that perspective, but we've got a long road ahead of us still, and we expect to do a very comprehensive job of talking about it with the community as we talk about it with the board. With that is the conclusion of my report, unless anyone has any questions.
I would just add a comment to make sure, because people sometimes read stuff into it. Not only is there no decisions or anything being made, it's just the first introduction and the beginning to set it out so that the public can learn all about it as part of a long public process of learning about it and having input. But it's a long time from now before we're even going to get to the question of when a decision will be made. This is a long-term project that isn't going to start for a number of years, and so there's no rush. This is something where there'll be ample time for everybody to look at it in detail and with care, and to have an opportunity to have their input. That said, that brings me to the people that do lots of planning, the Planning Commission. And Trustee Miller, do you have a report on the Planning Commission and what's happening?
Yes, I do. We have doubled up on meetings. We've been meeting every 2 weeks. I think we've had maybe 4 meetings since the last, so 4 Planning Commission meetings since the last village board meeting. We've had a panel of downtown developers. We've had a presentation on economic development and sustainability. We've had a panel on transit, and we've had a presentation on parking. And we have learned, not to our surprise, that there are mostly a lot of wonderful things about Glencoe as a place to to do business. We were encouraged by developers, mostly to just make it as easy as we could for them to do business here. And that was supported by our economic sustainability presentation, provide wayfinding, take advantage of the Glencoe identity, which seems to be a very strong sense in the community of that, and take advantage of special events, have more of them. That came up a lot. In parking, we found that there is enough parking in Glencoe. It's just not always exactly where people would want it. And so there are a lot of things we can do to deal with that issue. So there's the next phases of the planning process mostly is going to be more community outreach, having the conversation with all of us, and ultimately deciding what we want to propose to the village board as a plan for the downtown.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Do I recall correctly that the enough parking in Glencoe conclusion includes parking spaces on the east side of Green Bay for the train station? Is that
Yes.
counted as downtown parking?
That, yes, for, you may be thinking of the presentation by
Our parking consultant,
It
yes.
was done in contemplation of the new Writers Theater building.
Right.
And that parking consultant did look at the commuter lots, which for almost all of the performances, with the exception of matinees, weekday matinees, the lots there are extremely accessible. Valet parking is contemplated. It was for some patrons who choose to avail themselves of it. And there's also meaningful talk about having perhaps some sort of a crosswalk. Not a crosswalk, but more of an ability to cross from the commuter lot toward Tudor Court without having to come all the way down to the park.
Okay. I want to express a few concerns about that. I've been a longtime Writers Theater subscriber. I feel that in some respects I'm one of the youngest people there. It's cold here, it snows.
Are you going to matinees?
No, but the concept of some of the older patrons walking across Green Bay, I'm not positive. I mean, in Chicago, if I got a parking place that close to where I was going, I'd feel pretty good about it. But in the context that we operate up here, I wonder.
Well, there are no final conclusions or recommendations by any means on this. What I will say is that there are a lot of options for people, and there's, the parking right near Writers Theater is going to fill up, and Park Avenue is going to fill up, and maybe even Vernon eventually. But if people get there early enough and want to walk, that's not so bad. And there probably will be valet parking. I think that may have been, I don't remember how we framed that with Writers Theater, the valet parking. Was that going to be something we could require, or that they had offered, something like that? And that to me is the most logical option for people in the bad weather, or if they have any kind of limitations. So I'm not saying, I don't think that anyone is sanguine about it. There is not going to be lots of parking exactly where everybody wants it when they want it. And enough parking is almost a term of art.
Maybe what we need is, like in London, where they have those orange globes, they're crossing, and if somebody steps a foot into that space, everything has to come to a screeching halt, allow the person to go through.
I think that's Illinois law.
Yeah.
In theory, just
It may be, but I think that Illinois doesn't work. I can tell you in London it does, it's really extraordinary.
Yeah, I think you're right. Adequacy of parking is somewhat in the eye of the beholder. My particular issue was Writers Theater, which, especially with the new theater, is going to draw larger crowds. And it's cold and it's dark and it snows or it gets icy, and a lot of these people are older, and if they have to park over there, I just don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, I don't know that it's contemplated that everyone's going to be parking over there, there still are a lot of other spaces in downtown where you don't have to go over there, and I think that a lot of the talk about it was valets, and they can probably, you know, jump Green Bay with a single bound.
Yes.
All right. Trustee Thomas, can you tell us a little bit about the Golf Advisory Committee?
I can. Stella Nanos is scheduled to give a more complete presentation to the board, so I hope not to steal any of her thunder. I just want to say that the Golf Advisory Committee with Stella go over the whole budget in terms of you know, the rounds for the past year, the expected revenues, the expected expenses, the annual golf, you know, course improvement plan and so forth, and we've done that over several meetings. And we have approved the plan that Stella has proposed. For those who have not seen Stella's work in this respect, you know, she doesn't just pull these numbers out of thin air. She has developed a history of you know, tracking the kinds of expenses and revenues and improvement numbers that mean that in every year, I think, we have exceeded the revenues, even in an off year like this year because of weather. And on the other hand, most often we're below the projected expenses. So you can't do much better than that. I think, for example, this year, despite bad weather, the weather that led to lower water usage tends not to lead to greater golf usage. But nonetheless, if you look at the figures, we again had a successful year. The revenues exceeded the expenses. Those revenues get plowed back into the course, and that's what the plan is. No pun intended, but I think we're on course to have another successful year.
Excellent. In terms of the President's report tonight, I wanted to address a subject that has come up recently, which is the Governor's budget address, in which he touched on a number of subjects that affect or could be very impactful on local governments in the state of Illinois. Glencoe is a non-home rule, mature residential community. We only have two key basic sources of revenue: property taxes and our share of the state income tax, called the local distributed fund. The governor, in his budget address, among other things, proposed 3 tax-related changes that could have a profound negative effect on the village of Glencoe and its residents. His approach makes me believe that he does not understand the role and approach of local municipal governments as contrasted to other forms of local governments. If he did, he would know that these 3 tax-related proposals could badly cripple many local governments like Glencoe throughout the state of Illinois, and I'm sure that the legislature will have representatives hearing a great deal about that in discussions with him on it. While property taxes have for years been subject to a tax cap based on inflation, the governor has now proposed, as part of his budget address, that property taxes be frozen for 2 years. He's also proposed cutting the distributive share of the state income tax that goes to local governments by 50%. Local governments currently, once the current temporary increase expires, are supposed to receive approximately a 10% portion of the state's income tax. And it's not a benevolent grant, as he seems to think, to state funds, or a favor for local governments. In the period 1969 to 1970, when the constitutional change permitting an income tax was ratified, in return for local governments giving up the right to pass their own income taxes and the like, the state promised that it would distribute 10% of the income tax collected through to the local governments based on their populations. In effect, the state was to merely be the local government's collection mechanism for the local government's portion of the state income tax. What does a 50% reduction in Glencoe's share of local government distributive funds amount to? Approximately $415,000 or 2.5% as a reduction in our general revenues if the state were to adopt that approach. Glencoe is a non-home rule community without a major sales tax base. So we must view a 2.5% reduction in our general revenue fund as a significant impact on our ability to maintain our current level of services for our residents. We cannot raise property tax to accommodate this loss of revenue, as we are already limited by an inflation tax cap and face a freeze, as I said earlier. Our residents understand that the village is only a small part of their property tax bill. And since 2008, we have only raised taxes approximately 1.43% a year, less than the inflation in the cost of materials that we buy and use, and the inflation-adjusted wages we pay our employees. If we were able to raise property tax to cover the governor's request for a 50% cut in our part of the distributed share, we would be forced to raise our residents' property tax bills by more than 5% in just the first year to make up for the lost revenue. This would be more than 3 times the average increase over the past 6 years. When the state temporarily raised the state income tax, it did not share any of the increase with local governments. So as a village, our residents who pay a disproportionate amount of the state income tax for the past several years have been helping to save the state from its own overspending without getting anything in return. So it is especially inappropriate for the governor to now ask our residents to make a further sacrifice by trying to solve the state's self-inflicted problems on their back. The governor has argued that local governments are sitting on a lot of large cash reserves. In Glencoe, our policy is not to take unnecessary cash out of the pockets of our residents, so we only maintain a reserve of 10% of operating expenditures, or $1.4 million, in case of an extraordinary unexpected emergency. This is a thin margin, as 2008, when we had a recession, clearly proved. Clearly, we hope that our elected state representatives and senators will help the governor realize taking our share of the state income tax is a very, very bad idea. The other thing that the governor mentioned in his address is the idea that he does not think it appropriate at this time for the legislature and he to work on reforming of the police pension funds. Since 1980, even fully taking into account the nature of the job our outstanding public safety officers do, the state has dramatically increased the benefit level for public safety officers well beyond anything seen in the private sector. Over 16% of our revenues go to fund our public safety pensions. It has been clear that the public safety pension costs, as now structured, are not sustainable in the long run. So Glencoe, like communities throughout the entire state of Illinois, have been working on reforms. All of the municipalities across the state have been working to get the legislature to adopt appropriate pension reform. The governor has now sought to put an end to this current effort. The fourth measure the government proposed is only fitting given the first 3. He has recommended that the state legislature change the law so that municipalities can declare bankruptcy. Hopefully, we're not going to see any of this go through, and we won't need to avail ourselves of his generous offer. I thought that an appropriate comment since we're about to do our budgets and since we're about to embark, as we have in the past, on an effort to try and get the governor to better understand the issues that he has raised and created. And as you know, we've been very active in the Northwest Municipal Conference in talking with our legislators and with appropriate people in Springfield about issues such as pensions, and we shall continue to do that, and hopefully be successful in this instance. The other thing that I wanted to mention again, of course, is our next meeting is March 19th, and it's at that meeting that we'll receive the Strand report. Stella, would you like to tell us a little bit, on a happier note, about your budget for 2016 and your results for 2015? It's always nice to have a bright thing to follow something like talking about the governor's proposals.
This is a very brief review of where we ended up this year and review of our budget moving forward. As Dale mentioned and went through a little bit of our details, this was not the best year as far as rounds are concerned. We are more in line with a drought year. We prefer those heavily over too much water. Although we did save a lot of money on water because we didn't buy any water until July. But rounds were down this year overall, especially compared to the last 2 years that were very good weather years. But we did manage to pull through. Revenues were well over budget because of our academy. Pretty much exploded this year. We brought on another instructor. And we also got blessed with rounds in November and December that were not budgeted. So that helped quite a bit. And while weather does affect our business, we also do not have the amount of payroll that we had budgeted. So our payroll budget was well under what we budgeted. Our actuals are well under. So we saved quite a bit of money there. Along with all of that, we were able to put $234,000 back into the course in our annual improvement fund. So at the end of the year, we will increase our balance in that fund by $165,000. Our proposed budget for next year does have a little decrease in revenues because we're not expecting that surge in November and December. Not really going to be budgeting for that, not yet. And we do expect, hopefully, that our payroll will go back up because the weather will be there as well, and an added expense for that. We are adding a new full-time year-round employee this year, which raises everything quite a bit, including the benefits, and also our hourly wage is going up in line with the minimum wage from Chicago going up to $10 an hour. We have to match or exceed that in order to attract the kind of workforce that we're looking for. So that was an increase as well. We do have our budget at the end of the year to be $123,000 going forward, and quite a hefty improvement plan expense is expected for next year. Included in that expense, there's quite a bit of line item detail. The biggest one being the architectural fee that we have earmarked $400,000. In the event that everything goes along as planned for the new clubhouse, that is the amount that is earmarked for that expense. So that's a big expense. Some of the more exciting ones I have highlighted, we are going to expand and extend the 10th tee and do a complete renovation of that, which is going to be a nice improvement to the golf course, creating a pollinator habitat in line with our sustainability and being good stewards of the land. We continue to try to enhance our Audubon Society. And pump house upgrades, this is $30,000. This is the first year in a 3-year expense of getting our pump house back up to where it should be. Annual spending on trees include, this will be the final ash tree removal year, and we're also planting new trees as part of that. And we're gonna have to do some work in our ditch this year to improve the drainage there. But like I said, the majority of that big expense is going to be the architectural expense. But just looking back over the last 8 years, we have reinvested over $2 million back into the golf course. Not a small amount. We're averaging about $250,000 a year back into the club. And we still are pretty healthy in our fund balance right now, so that allows us to go forward with the big expense in the improvement fund for next year. And that's it in a nutshell. Joel, you look confused.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the first slide?
Very first, the budget
The,
projection,
that's the one.
okay?
As I understand it, you increased the fund 165 after spending 234 as an improvement.
Yes.
Okay, can we go to the next one? Are you saying that apples to apples, you're looking to increase it 123 after expending 730?
Not after, no,
No,
no.
and you deserve some benefit, because 450 of that is sort of capital, it's extraordinary,
Right,
but you're not,
right.
it's not apples to apples.
No, so right now, at the end of this fiscal year, our fund balance as a whole, Joe, will be like 1.1. So after this year, our total is gonna go to 123 to the good. If we do spend that 737, the balance in that will be somewhere around 596.
Got it, so we're gonna foot the bill
Correct,
on spec for the, got it.
right. And that was the whole plan, that we were
The
putting
system
that
has
money.
detected that a minimum number of lines are connected to this conference. Do you want to continue your meeting? Press 1 to confirm.
That was our plan from the beginning, as we put money into that reserve fund, that it would be earmarked for future spending, so we will, even if we spend all this money, we'll have over $500,000 in the reserve fund.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the consideration of the fiscal year 2016 village budget and the consideration of a resolution establishing the fiscal year 2016 annual fees. Dave, you want to give us a little discussion?
Get a motion to approve the golf.
I was just gonna say, we need to formally approve the golf club budget.
Ah,
So moved.
I forgot that we got to actually approve that. Can I have a roll call?
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Still doing such a good job, I just automatically assume we approve.
Well,
You
tonight,
have a tough act to follow, Dave, to see if you can do as well.
Dave Mel says, golf is recreation, where can it be? So, this is basically my pleasure to present to the board consideration of the recommended fiscal year 2016 budget. It's a process that staff and the board spends a great deal of time and effort beginning. I always kid around that as soon as we start the new fiscal year, we're already opening up the next fiscal year and starting the process of planning, and that'll be no different this year. Process in the summer with review of policy and also the review of the long-range capital plan and the long-range financial forecast, all building towards the process. The budget presented for board consideration has total expenditures of $22,441,501 in all funds, with the general fund expenditures of $16,516,515. The general fund expenditures exceed the operating revenue by $526,000. The general fund reserves in excess of policy targets of fund balance are used to fund that. So even with the use of $526,000, the village will still be in excess of minimum fund balance targets. The budgeted ending fund balance, if all things work out as according to budget, would be $2,511,829, or 16.1% of operating expenditures, versus a target of 1.4 million, or 10%. It's really every year that, if you look historically, that in recent years, that the fund balance has been in excess of the minimum fund balance target, and each year we're driving
and putting pressure to move back towards the minimum fund balance target. As the budget includes that all operating funds will be in excess of fund balance targets by the end of the fiscal year. The budget maintains the existing service levels, and it addresses issues that are identified in the strategic plan process, which is a process that the board completed earlier in the year. There's numerous projects which are addressed on a subsequent slide that will be administered by, will be the responsibility of all departments and administered by the manager's office to make sure that we're making appropriate steps towards implementing those strategic priorities. Some of the budget highlights include, the board had discussed the policy concerning how pensions are funded. The conclusion was to continue the existing practice, which means that $1,562,863 is included in the budget to fund the pension obligation as determined by village actuaries versus what the state of Illinois would otherwise require, which is $1,167,493. This amount is about, in excess by about almost 34% of that state of Illinois requirement. But the board by policy has found that to be, and actually historically, it has been more of an appropriate funding amount. The budget also continues the garbage fund subsidy from the general fund. There's a $450,000 transfer to help support operations of the garbage fund. It's one way also to help keep fees down for residents. The board considered tax abatement of $78,000 during the deliberation on the 2014 tax levy, and determined at that time that it would be appropriate not to abate this year and to use those funds for a source of issuance costs on new debt service. Continuing on, some new personnel. This budget includes new personnel, including the reinstatement of a second deputy director position. It includes 2 new public safety officers, and it includes the replacement of a part-time administrative intern with a management analyst position. And those funds are included in the budget. The highlights somewhat of all staffing, but particularly with the public safety staffing. It helps address succession planning. It helps to moderate overtime, ultimately the overtime costs. It'll increase the flexibility of the department to respond to training and certification mandates. It increases resource allocation in areas of need. And then also the future use will be more targeted on a short-term basis versus just simply covering shifts. Again, addressing areas of need. And then other personnel adjustments included in the budget, public safety, the officers, the union, the fraternal order of police, they get a 2.5% increase or a $55,000 increase from the prior year. ASME is the public works bargaining unit, 2% increase or $36,000. And then non-union employees of the village, 2.5% or $99,000. Health insurance increased by 0.5%. The village joined IPVC with an 18-month rate guarantee, and also saved substantially on broker's fees and some life insurance costs to the tune of about $50,000. This budget also includes the first year implementation of the Affordable Care Act requirement for providing insurance to employees that are in the past haven't been given insurance because they weren't full-time employees, but now meet the number of hours worked to require to be offered insurance, and that cost is about $87,000. And next slide are some of the highlights again of going back to that initial slide about the strategic plan projects. These are some of the areas addressing operational effectiveness. There's a strategic IT analysis of about, anticipated to be about $40,000. Implementation of a work order software system of about $50,000. Related to organizational development, a compensation study and workforce development projects and some maintenance and some training. Again, those two items are $50,000. Related to community engagement, there's a citizen survey, budgeted at $30,000, and a website redesign budgeted at $32,000. The capital budget of the village is a total of $5,076,000. The subtotal listed above of $1.1 million is basically out of operating resources in those funds. The other items that are listed, the $3.9 million, those are projects, the sanitary sewer, the storm sewer project, the sidewalk, and the street resurfacing. Those are all contingent upon successful completion of our successful outcome on the referendum. Absent the referendum, those projects will have to be reevaluated for a future or some other funding source. Next slide. The budget includes some modest fee modifications. Increases are basically set within the parameters of village policy. The budget includes a 1.5% increase in water rates, in sewer rates, in garbage fees, and in ambulance fees. There's a 1.5% increase in the management fees paid by other funds to the general fund. And there is a 1.5% increase in the motor fuel tax daily route transfer. There is also an increase in the per mile transport fee for ambulance calls from $7.17 per mile to $10 per mile. Again, I mentioned the management fees. The management fees are basically increases to the water management fee, the garbage management fee, and the golf club management fee. That's a summary of the fiscal year 2016 budget as presented for consideration, acceptance by the village board.
Any questions? All right, may I have a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2016 budget and to adopt the resolution establishing the annual fees to comply with those in the budget?
I so move.
Second?
Can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce. Trustee Solomon. Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, that completes our regular business. I would like to have a motion for us to adjourn into an executive session for the purpose of discussing the sale or disposition of property under Open Meetings Act Section 2C56 and personnel employee matters under Open Meetings Act Section 2C1. May I have a motion?
Second?
Call the roll.
Trustee Collins.
Yes.
Trustee Hayek.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Solomon.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.